On this channel, ever since I started this Classic Sonic review series, one thing has stayed somewhat consistent. I only really cover official Sonic content, whether that be Classic Sonic reviews or modern Sonic reviews. I originally planned on making a video talking about Sonic World, which is a 3D Sonic fan game, but I decided against it. So, one would speculate that in order for Kranos Island to make a video about a fan game demo that just came out, it'd have to have quite the high quality. And to that, you're completely right. Sonic Galactic is a fan-made interpretation of what a 2D side-scrolling entry in the Sonic series could have looked like on modern hardware. This is the goal of Sonic Galactic, to create the ideal, perfect experience of the classic Sonic games with improved level design, boss fights, and especially tech. This isn't just met, but absolutely crushed. There's so many things this demo does exceptionally well, despite it not having that many zones. Without further ado, let's review the Sonic Galactic demo. Before we start with the zones of the game, I want to touch on the tutorial because there's a lot more that's actually happening here than it may seem. Firstly, if you're playing as Sonic as I usually do, you'll know that Sonic has all his previous skills from the classic Sonic games, save the Insta-Shield because I guess it's just unimportant. But what's really cool is that a lot of the moves Sonic has are expanded upon in his moveset. Now, Sonic can perform a wall dash, where you drop dash and touch a wall. This is a really subtle change. A lot of the time it doesn't really matter because it's not every time you drop dash onto a wall in normal gameplay. But when it does matter, it matters a lot. Normally, when you encounter a random wall in Mania that you didn't know was there, you'll just drop down and slide up unsuccessfully against a ramp for it. Or even worse, if it's a 90-degree angle, you just drop dash into the ground, losing all momentum. But with the wall dash, Sonic can now scale walls to an extent, which can be crucial for speed. It's honestly such a powerful extension yet so tiny that it feels extremely new and polished simultaneously. And that's not even the best part, because even with the wall dash, not a lot of momentum can be gained if you want to move the opposite way. The most you could do is start holding in the opposite direction if you want to move there, right? Well, actually, no, not in Sonic Galactic. Because if you jump while you're in a wall dash, Sonic actually pushes himself off the wall he's on and does the coolest flip I've ever seen. You can't chain wall dashes to each other, which balances it out. I do think that chaining just 2 wall dashes should be a possibility, but it's not like anything is inherently wrong with it now. Another thing the game does is change how the elemental shields work. There's 2 buttons for jumping, and if you hit the second one, then the elemental shield effect is applied. This is probably one of my least favorite changes to the game, because it's really confusing to want to double jump with a lightning shield, only for you to start charging a drop dash, or vice versa. I do understand why it was done, it's not all the time you want to bounce with a water shield, but it's still quite annoying. The tutorial teaches all of this in a really straightforward way, and even tests you at the end for you to get all the mechanics. There's even a boss fight, teaching that all bosses work on a weak spot system. Even other than that, the visuals and music are amazing. I also love the fact that you're given an option on whether or not you want to actually do a tutorial. Overall, it's a perfect tutorial to get you ready for the game. Man, what the hell is a verdant, bruh? Well, you learn something new every day, I guess. Verdant Isle Zone is the first zone in Sonic Galactic, and to me, it's personally the best of the 3 we have. It's not by far, all 3 of them are extremely great zones in my eyes. Verdant Isle is just a little bit superior. It's not the most original setting for the first zone of the game, it always seems like they have to be greenery instead of just about anything else, but it actually varies it up quite a bit. This zone though is absolutely amazing. It feels very expansive, so much so that when I first played the zone, I honestly felt that it was simply too big and especially too long. In itself, while just playing casually, it took me 2 minutes to reach the boss, which when speeding through the level feels a bit too long. But on my second playthrough, I realized that that wasn't the case. The zone can go by extremely quickly. You actually need to know what you're doing, which is very similar to how some of the better games like Sonic 3 and Sonic Mania work. And yeah, the level design is big, but it's only really big if you let it. You need experience and need to feel used to the tech Sonic has in order to blast through the zone, and I love that. Besides the length, the level design is exactly like Angel Island's, in that it has speed and exploration incorporated almost seamlessly. Another wonderful thing is the music of the zone, because it works extremely well with its own aesthetic, and is overall really good. And the last thing there is are the boss fights. Like Sonic 3, this game features mini-bosses, and the first one is actually decent. It's very easy, not only because you're constantly running forward and there are rings to grab, but also drop dashing constantly pretty much guarantees you'll win. It's the very first mini-boss of the game though, and at least it's a lot better than Fire Breath. The boss fight is a lot better, because it shows off how the weak point system we talked about earlier in the tutorial can be used really well. The boss in itself isn't really a challenge. I'd argue that if you could hit the boss normally, you'd probably beat him before he could even start his attack. But the weak area are always both extremely obvious, and the boss is very responsive. So if you hit the wrong place, you'll bounce off and know, and if you hit the right place, you'll hit it and know that's where you want to hit next time. Overall, a near perfect experience for the first zone in the game. Since we're totally not taking after Sonic 3, the next zone is, you guessed it, a water level. After Sonic tanks a point-blank explosion right to his face, we end up in Coral Garden, the second zone of the demo. This zone unfortunately starts to do some things that I don't think are all that good. To be honest though, it does keep a lot of the very good things from Verdant Isle with a few changes. There's a really noticeable lack of exploration in Act 1, and it's a lot more focused on platforming and running through speedy sections while underwater. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention? This entire act takes place underwater. This actually surprised me when I first realized it because the act still flows quite well. But this is a zone where I actually do believe it's a bit too long. Because there's a scarcity of exploration, there's a lack of things to do outside the main route, say from maybe a shield or a ring box. That's not necessarily a problem, there's a reason why people like Hydro City so much, and it's very similar. But if all that is true, and it's taking me at best 4 whole minutes to reach the mini-boss, that's a serious problem. One of the reasons Hydro City worked so well is because when you knew what you were doing, it would zip by. This just feels boring at moments. Sure, to be honest, there's a lot going on. But gameplay wise, I'd say this is the weakest of them all. Still not saying it's bad, this stuff is peak. But one thing I do think Coral Garden has that it's the best out of the demo is the amazing music. It's really peaceful, and yet it kind of just smooths out. It feels like the song was kind of made into the zone because they work together so well. It's honestly one of the better water tracks I've heard, but still, there's no way it's beating Hydro City. One thing I do dislike about Coral Garden is the whole air breathing as a whole. Not actually the actual breathing aspect of it. During my first playthrough, I only drowned once. I'm talking about the uncertainty of what can give you air. Yes, it's obvious the bubbles are the main source, but I had no idea that the bubble circular screams actually do give you air, because by the looks of it, it doesn't look like it does. This also wouldn't be a problem if the SFX for breathing was used, but I didn't hear anything. No reminder, no air breathing, heck, no drowning music? I don't really get why this is the case, especially since a lot of the game's sounds use Mania sound. So why not just use that? It doesn't hurt the level that much, but I feel it should be more apparent so that it isn't that confusing. Other than that, however, the mini-boss is great. Before the mini-boss, this crab goes around destroying the level design around you, which really adds to the action like I said earlier. And the mini-boss itself, while I do think it's a bit too easy for even now, it's not anything too bad. The classics never really had good difficulty increases as said games progressed, and while I do really wish they did that here, I don't mind if they don't. And the problems with Act 1 aren't really present in Act 2. Act 2 of Coral Garden takes the water level theming a lot more traditionally, where only a portion of the zone is covered in water. It really reminds me of Aquatic Ruin Zone, but it's like Hydro City if the speed was balanced out with exploration and hidden secrets. Not like Hydro City if it was aquatically ruined. Come on guys, that was at least a little bit funny. The theme is really unique as well. The area before the boss fight is one of the most interesting set pieces the demo has, where getting behind brick walls actually stops the shooting of the missiles. Even though not much is actually happening in this part, it's still really cool. The boss fight, however, is kind of odd. It's not bad, but it's also kind of confusing. I still don't, to this moment, have any sort of idea how to beat the boss fight, or even where its weak spot is, because hitting it just about anywhere seems to do the trick. Overall though, it's still a great zone. Just feel like if Act 1 was more like Act 2, it'd easily be absolute perfection. Hey, wait a second, let's go back to that segment before the boss fight. Do I recognize this gameplay? Is there another extremely popular fan-made two-dimensional pixel-solved Sonic-related project which involves you hiding from a potential threat that could potentially kill you if you don't hide behind an object, with a certain time limit to get to a safe zone where the attack is launched against you, and that you can play as Tails in both instances? Truly an interesting proposition, which forms such a highly conversational topic, it leaves me flabbergasted. Finally, we have Luminosity Zone, which at the moment only has one act. And honestly, I don't know how to feel about this zone. It's frankly the worst of the three current zones, and I don't think that's necessarily from it only being one act. The main thing with Luminosity is that nothing really stands out from each other. The visuals of Verdant Isle is a lot better, as well as Coral Garden. The music doesn't really match the song the way Coral Garden does, and I feel I could take Studiopolis' soundtrack and replace it with this and it would feel the same. The level also has this extremely weird issue where seeing the actual gameplay is really hard at times, and there was even a section where I just didn't know what to do for a pretty long time. Other than that, the level design is just kinda wanky in general. It has these pulled Sonic slides down, which are all fairness is pretty cool. Things like the screw just don't fit. It's overall a decent zone gameplay wise. The reason this zone is actually pretty memorable isn't because of the gameplay, because of the introduction to a new robot, Turbo. No, not the snail! What the heck? Turbo is a robot made by Eggman, but unlike Metal Sonic who thinks he's Sonic equal, Turbo already thinks he's far superior to him, which is why he shows up by styling on Sonic and later shows up to zoom past us. Like, buddy, you're not that cool, bruh. We can literally see you. Bro's got that Piccolo entrance, bruh. And in the mini-boss, you're about to face off against him when the mini-boss interrupts. He's actually pretty cool, playing notes as attacks and even an improvement on Hydro City and Carnival Knight's gimmicks where he pulls you in, then sends an attack at you. And by far, this is my favorite boss because of how much there is to it. For one, there's a whole bunch of characters in the background like Honey the Cat, Ristar, some Egg Robos, and some other faces that I don't recognize. The only one that stands out is mainly Metal Sonic, who's in the center. The guy's straight up creepy, because until I noticed this, I thought he was just looking in one side of the arena. But turns out this guy literally looks directly at you. It was kinda creepy when I noticed it. And the second thing I love is something to do with the boss itself. I didn't know this until my second playthrough, but if the boss is spinning around and you drop dash into it, it gets knocked back. You walk it back. Bro, shut up! It was actually pretty cool to figure this out, and with that, the demo ends after running through a second section which looks amazing. And that's the Sonic Galactic demo. It's nice to see a lot more Duty Sonic fan games coming out around this time like Sonic Roll Blast 2, Sonic Unfold Star, and Sonic Triple Trouble, but I definitely think that Sonic Galactic has one of the greatest potentials I've seen for a Sonic fan game in a while. If this is done right, Sonic Galactic might just surpass certain titles like Sonic 3 Knuckles and Sonic Mania. Thank you, Star Team, for this amazing demo, and thank you so much for watching the video.